Welcome to Semi-Retired with your hosts, Richard Bonomo.
And Dave Farrant.
Hi, Dave. Today, we're looking to see if the truth is out there.
Yeah, because I know I want to believe, Richard.
So do I. So I guess for those of you who don't know, we're going to be talking UFOs.
UFOs, or UAPs.
UAPs, yeah. I've got a whole list here of names.
Yes.
And I can't believe the amount of names they come up for these things. None of the military guys I saw in the documentary want to say UFOs.
Right.
It's all UAPs, what is it? Unidentified aerial phenomenon, unidentified aerial technology. They had like a whole bunch of these names. It's wild. Nobody wants to say UFOs.
Yeah, I guess it has that stigma associated with it of like kind of UFO nuts over the decades, and they just want to clear themselves away from that.
And what I found interesting is you have a lot of people who, when they talk, need to speak acronyms, right? So it's like ATIP, like this is something you'll come across.
ATIP, yeah,
ATIP, and they say ATIP, which is AATIP, and the need to make words out of letters. Yet nowhere do they say UFO.
You're right. So they don't say UFO. I like it, though.
Well, you remember on Saturday Night Live, Father Guido Sarducci talking about UFOs.
No, I don't. No. I'll buy that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Dave, I guess we'll jump into UFOs, and I guess you could break it down into three main categories. One would be the ships. Two would be
the inhabitants, the occupants of the ships,
the gray men.
Yes,
and I guess the third part would be obviously the abductions. And those kind of
alleged abductions.
Alleged.
Yeah,
exactly. All right, so shall we jump in?
Yeah. So for me, the whole idea of UFOs, or my awareness of them, started with Chariots of the Gods, which came around in about 1970. That was the Eric von Daniken book that was made into a documentary and was claiming that many medieval and many reports and images from medieval art and art from the antiquities were actually capturing images of UFOs. I think you saw it too, right?
I'm not sure if I saw the documentary, but I remember the book. And I'm pretty sure I read it because when I was a kid, I had a pretty big UFO obsession back in the 70s, like everyone did in the 70s.
That makes two of us, yeah.
It was the glory days of UFOs,
it was.
Bigfoot, and whatever. Sasquatch back then. Yeah, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, sorry. The Yeti, those kind of weird phenomenon were super popular back then.
Oh, yeah.
Bermuda Triangle.
That was another one, right? It was everywhere. The books, the movies. Yeah. I even made a UFO one time with my brother. We came across the plans in a magazine somewhere. We used a laundry bag. And so we got a laundry bag from the laundromat and got like a little can of Sterno and made a little frame across the bottom of this. So the idea was that the flames would light up, would fill the bag with warm air, and it would bounce across the sky and, generate local UFO reports. We had a flat roof on our house, so we put all this together up there, let it off, and all it did was it basically sank to the ground, burning. And then the bag imploded and it just caught fire and just like quietly died on our lawn. So, zero, no success at all.
So your very own Roswell.
It was our Roswell. That's right. Yeah. So total failure. Yeah. So I guess that probably grew out of the Chariots of the Gods, experience. But that was a big one, Chariots of the Gods. I think we even talked about it at school. So big media presence there.
Probably. I would have been 6 when this came out. So, 1970 West German documentary film.
And of course, we both grew up in the shadow of Star Trek, I'm sure.
Yes.
So, by the time I was 10, 11 years old, the idea of alien life was like very, very familiar to me. And thinking that there were, beings on other planets, just not terribly unusual.
And I grew up watching television in French when I was a kid, so I saw Star Trek in French. And one day I saw it in English, and I said, "What the hell is this?"
Did you really? C'est quoi ça?
Exactly. I grew up watching Land of the Lost, Land of the Giants, Star Trek, everything in French. They were dubbed in French back then, and that's how I saw them. And I would go to my friend's house who had cable and was seeing these things in English, and it blew my mind that these were English shows. I thought they were French shows.
Of course.
Yeah.
Land of the Giants.
So the aliens spoke French.
Yeah, you've reminded me of Land of the Giants. I loved that one too.
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, the giant paper clips and
all that stuff. Yes, yeah. So, anyways, I guess the 60s really. Let's go back a bit. Let's talk about during World War II. I guess this would be the modern age of UFO sightings. Allied pilots flying over Europe in World War II reported what they called Foo Fighters, from which the group eventually grew its name in Seattle in the 1990s. And they were described as sort of bright balls or objects that they were following their fighter aircraft. And there were so many of these that it became something that was reported in the news. So Foo Fighters. And then coming out of World War II, just 2 years later, was the famous Roswell Incident. Mm-hmm. Which has been the subject of books and TV shows and documentaries and movie T-shirts. I mean, the town down there, I've seen footage from the town. The town, when you visit Roswell, New Mexico, if you do visit Roswell, New Mexico, is basically a tourist trap for alien seekers.
It's a giant gift shop.
It is a gift shop. That's right. Exactly. That's it. So, but the thing with Roswell that, made it so interesting at the time was, for about 24 hours after because what happened was an object crashed in a farmer's, over a farmer's property.
Come on, Dave, let's be real. It was a weather balloon.
Well, yeah. It was a giant condom, yeah. Yeah. So this object crashes on this farmer's property, and when he goes out to look at what's come down, the farmer does, he discovers this strange wreckage that doesn't resemble anything that he might expect to find out there. There's an Air Force base nearby, Roswell Air Force Base. So he calls the base thinking it could be something of theirs that they've lost. They come out, and lo and behold, for about 24 hours, the news is saying that according to the Roswell Air Force Base, a flying saucer, a disc, has crashed at Roswell, and that they're busy scooping up the remnants. And about 24 hours later, the whole thing got shut down. So for 24 hours, the news out of Roswell was, yes, we have a UFO. And since then, the cover-up has been debated endlessly back and forth between the UFO aficionados and the non-believers.
Interesting, yes. Area 51, I was just looking it up. I was wondering, was Area 51 existing before the crash? And no, it seems like
that's a good question.
The U.S. military took it over acquired the site in 55. And it's administered by the Edwards Air Force Base, which, we often hear of in
Edwards,
movies. I'm sure it's in Top Gun like 7 times they mention it. But it's one of those things. If you look on Google Earth, there's nothing. It's like it's blurred. Our camera's
blank, right?
A weather balloon got in the way and blurred the camera that time. Yeah, so that's the big incident is Roswell, which is what kicks off the modern age of UFOs.
I think so. I think that's fair to say. And in fact, there's a YouTuber I listen to. His name is Jerry Croft. He's a California-based professor of psychology, but he does interesting videos on like the Kennedy assassination and so on and so forth. And he'll occasionally hit like crop circles and UFOs. He claims, does Jerry Croft, that in 1965 or 66, one of his students, he was a teacher then, brought him a piece of material that her father had gotten from the Roswell crash site, and that he actually handled it, and that it was, again, he didn't know what the little girl didn't say what it was, just she brought it in to show him, and he describes it as a piece of material, gray, if you will, non-reflective surface that he couldn't cut it with his scissors. Took his scissors out of his teacher's desk, and when he folded it up and crumpled it up, it would like spring back to life again and show no creases or folds. Kind of like memory fabrics we have now. Yeah. But he thinks that he's convinced to this day that he was holding, and he tried to get a hold of scientists and asked them to identify it based on current technologies. This is mid-60s now. Could it be Kevlar, which I think was new then, and
could it be polyester?
It could have been. Yeah, rayon, eh?
Leisure suits.
Yeah, leisure suits. Yeah. So, anyways, I found that again. Every now and then these reports show up that from people, and I kind of think Jerry seems like a rational guy, and I'm kind of like, well, what's that all about? Sort of thing. Can that be real?
Yeah, it's surprising we don't see more of those kind of artifacts being snuck out from Area 51, unless they've all been gathered and stored in some sort of vault under high security, and they really guard that. But it seems surprising that 70 years later we're still not seeing any more of that kind of stuff come out.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, because of course, one of the threads of this story is the whole government cover-up, the government concealment aspect of things. And I don't know, government, I guess we're talking the military here. And you've probably heard that Obama and Clinton or whatever asked for information on UFOs as soon as they got into office, and were told, well, there's nothing for you to see here, sort of thing, or there's nothing to repeat. And the belief is that there's top secret kind of cells in the U.S. military that are just keeping this stuff under wraps. For what purpose, I don't know. Theoretically, again, we can't handle it, right? That's the whole thing. Like, people will go berserk if they think there's a crash saucer. And I suppose bring the whole global civilization down. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. In the documentary I watched last night, UFO, I think it's on Showtime. It's a 4-part documentary produced, I believe, by J.J. Abrams. And there's a part where Stephen Colbert is interviewing Obama, and he asks him the question, have you seen them? And basically Obama's very, half smile, kind of says, no, I haven't seen anything. There's nothing to see, kind of stuff. And he says, so are there UFOs? And he's like, you believe what you want to believe. And Colbert is basically saying, so I guess you're saying there is. Otherwise, you would have said, no, there are no UFOs. And Obama just gives him a half smile and says, believe what you want to believe, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they just, that's as far as they go.
Yeah, it's so infuriating, right? Because you would hope you could be more categorical about that. But
I wonder if there are factions of the military who have info and don't believe that some elected official is important enough or smart enough to be privy to this information, and they think that they are more the gatekeepers of this kind of thing, and that the president doesn't really need to know until it becomes important.
Yeah, well, I can believe that. I mean, especially since they're seeing it as a threat, which I think the ATIP is the Advanced Threat Identification Program, the one you mentioned before, or Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. So they see these things as a threat, but you, at the same time, threat are also scientific possibility or scientific opportunity. And if we are about to be invaded by these things, if that's the end game, kind of like a little bit of warning, rather than just finding out one Thursday morning that, like, hey, they've appeared in all our major cities or over all our major cities, like that movie Contact.
Exactly. Interesting. So if we go back, we have Roswell, but I was wondering, is that really the first time we start hearing of UFOs? Or have there been earlier reporting? As I remember Roswell, obviously, and the sightings in the 70s, and you see these super grainy, blurry, shaky videos, not unlike Sasquatch, or Bigfoot back then. And so I did a search, and according to the Wikipedia, the first recorded sightings of possible UFOs, it takes place in 1440 BC.
Ooh.
Should be before Roswell. And according to the disputed, and I love this, disputed Thule papyrus, scribes of the pharaoh Thutmose III reported fiery discs were encountered floating over the skies. The Condon Committee disputed the legitimacy of the Thule papyrus, stating Thule was taken in and the papyrus is a fake. So I love this because when I was doing a little research last night, there are these committees, these groups that somehow have funding, and their job is to basically disprove that there's UFOs. And I think the Condon Committee is one, and I'm trying to find the other one. Oh, here we go. There's one called the Skeptics Organization, or the Skeptics Group, and that's the actual name of it. So something weird like that. Yeah. And their entire job is to debunk these kind of things. And you're like, well, it almost sounds like one of those environmental studies financed by the oil companies.
Yeah, there's a guy called Michael Shermer who does this professionally. He's the editor or publisher, maybe both, of Skeptic Magazine. Has a podcast and YouTube channel. And that's Michael's whole thing. And he's an interesting guy. He's very listenable, but he is there to debunk pretty much anything anybody can come up with. And I find it a bit infuriating sometimes because you sense that he's just not going to believe anything about anything ever. And I find that too closed off.
Yeah, so there's other sightings going, 12. It's funny because between 1440 and BC and 218 BC, there's no sightings or no recorded sightings anyways. And then it goes on, and it's 8th century, and it goes on, and I guess the heyday really is the 20th century, and I guess the 21st century are really the heyday. Is obviously we have more recordings, we take more notes, we have access to more technology to be able to record these sightings.
Well, that's one of my bugaboos, sort of thing, is like, we've got, because again, I think the visual evidence, even though there's video evidence in the last few years, is getting a little more interesting. Yeah. The fact that we're all walking around, or like all over the planet, people are like holding high resolution cameras on their persons, which was not the case 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago. You would hope that we'd get something a little better than we have. I find that really frustrating. I just want to have somebody release 5 or 6 crystal clear, high resolution images of a UFO hovering over something that I can look at it and go, look at that. Look at the texture.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, look at the license plate.
Well, one of the interesting parts I saw in the documentary yesterday is one of the, and I'm not sure if it's that couple that you mentioned.
Barney and Betty Hill.
I'm not sure if it's them who mentioned this because there was quite a few people, especially when you get into the later part of the documentary where they talk about abductions. But basically, they had like this little, almost child's drawing of a spaceship, and there's little windows, and you see little people inside, and they're saying that as the ship was hovering, they were able to see the people, beings, whatever, looking back at them.
I've heard that.
And I'm like, wow, that they must have been pretty close to see that. Because if you look up at an airplane, no matter how low an airplane, even an airplane coming down, landing at the airport, I can't see anything in those little windows. So they've discovered really good glass.
Yeah.
That they can have these windows that can travel through space and big enough that they can have those picturesque windows like Star Trek or Star Wars, you know, nice big picture windows seeing space. I thought that was interesting.
Well, that's the other part of that. I mean, again, if I ask myself, if an alien civilization is capable of building a star-hopping spacecraft, is it just going to put windows on the outside like that? Like, you know, it doesn't strike me as that believable. You know, I fall off of things like that.
Well, that was one of the few descriptions that actually mentioned windows. Most of the time, you see them. They're so far up or whatever. They're often described as pill shapes, flying saucers,
triangles.
Triangles. This is the other one I found interesting. I didn't remember that. Is the flying V? There's a lot of descriptions of these triangles or flying Vs, and I found that very interesting because when you think UFOs, we always think flying saucers, the discs.
Well, the Phoenix Lights were a flying V, if I'm not mistaken,
exactly.
right? Or a triangle, but I think it actually was a V, like a boomerang-shaped object. Exactly. That was a famous incident from 1997 where, hundreds of people watched this phenomena as it hovered, like over the city of Phoenix for like a long, long period of time. It wasn't like a quick in and out. It was there for like an hour or something. And it caused such a furor that the local, I think it was the mayor of Phoenix, had to do. You saw that press conference where he trotted out the guy in the green alien suit.
So let me give you
Symington
some context
or something like that.
So let me give you some context. The thing caused a big uproar, whatever, and eventually the flying lights took off to another city in Arizona, where there's more reporting there. But essentially, it's a councilwoman in the city council of Phoenix who approaches, and there's actual footage of this, of her going to a council meeting and asking, so what about the lights? What are we going to do about this? Is anybody, and the entire council, the rest of the councilors look at her like she's insane. Like they're like, why are you even bringing this up? And she's done speaking, and basically, I guess the chairperson goes, and Counselor blah blah blah, and basically just ignores the entire thing. And so there's a lot of interviews with her in the documentary, and she's the only one who tried to pursue this. And so then they go to the governor, and his name is gonna escape.
It's Symington, isn't it? Isn't it
something
Symington?
like that? Yeah. And so it goes to him, and he basically at some point declares that he's going to make an investigation, whatever. The documentary interviews him like recently, and he claims he did see the lights. He saw the lights. He denied it the entire time it happened, but he claims he saw the lights, and there's a whole conspiracy theory about the press conference where he trots out the alien, right? At one point, he holds a press conference and says, yes, we requested, I forget if it's the DIP or whatever. They do love their acronyms down there.
They do.
To investigate this, and they've already come back with some evidence, and here's the evidence, and some guy comes out, and he's dressed like a big alien with a big alien head, and they turned it into a joke. And so some of the people thought this was a conspiracy and that he had been told to diffuse the whole situation.
To ridicule it, right?
Yes, because he was under investigation for tax fraud or something
I never
like
heard
that.
That part of it.
And that went away, but later on he did end up going to jail for tax fraud and this kind of thing. So there's a whole conspiracy theory that he was told to make light of this and will make the charges go away, which kind of doesn't work out because he did end up going to jail later on anyways. But yeah, the whole Phoenix Lights thing, they dedicate a good portion of the first episode to the Phoenix Lights.
So I think probably, and that's 50 years between the Phoenix Lights and Roswell. Those are probably the two, like they've got the name recognition, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think if you said to somebody Roswell, even who's not interested in UFOs, they probably have heard it somewhere or other. And the same with Phoenix Lights, because it just got that big, you know?
Although I didn't remember Phoenix Lights.
Oh, really? Eh?
No.
Okay.
97, but I did not remember that at all.
Okay.
And
then in between that, I mean, far less spectacular. In 1977, the day before Elvis dies, as it turns out, just in case, you know.
I was in Saint Sauveur.
Well, yeah, I know where I was. I was driving. I was in Rosemere in a friend's car, and we heard, like, you know, that Elvis had died. We're like, oh, the king is dead. The king is dead.
Yeah,
you know?
we had rented a country house in Saint Sauveur, and I remember walking into the living room. The TV was on, and they were announcing that Elvis was dead. So I have that memory is right there. Yeah.
I wasn't a fan, by the way.
Elvis, okay.
I knew who he was.
Yeah.
There wasn't, you know, I was more into like Fleetwood Mac at that point, you know.
Exactly.
Something like that. So in 1977, August 15th to be exact, a radio telescope located, I think it's in Illinois, called the Big Ear, received what's been called
what a name. Great
the
name.
Big Ear.
Yeah.
Received what has come to be called the wow signal. So the way this worked, and I watched a documentary on this a few weeks ago on the wow signal itself, believe it or not, an entire hour on a signal.
How long was the actual signal?
Oh, like seconds, sort of like seconds, I think. But it's more that it occurred where there was nothing. There was literally nothing. The guys are looking at reams and reams of data as this radio telescope is searching a particular part of the sky. And then out of nowhere, this signal appears that, as far as they're concerned, with their ability to interpret audio signals, is not of natural origin. And it disappears and they never hear from it again. And to this day, and now we're talking, 1977, so 23, 20, 45 years ago, it's still considered to be the most credible, realistic evidence of alien communication we've ever received. So forget crash discs, forget Phoenix Lights, you got sort of like a few seconds of radio signal.
I wonder how that compares to those crazy pulses that they've been observing in the last few years coming from deep space.
Oh yeah, right.
So I don't know if that's similar. Yeah, I see here the wow signal, and I love that it's called wow with an exclamation point.
Yes, well, it's because apparently a guy wrote that on the margin. He's looking at his printout and he sees this and he goes, wow, and that's it. So now it's hence it got its name.
I wonder if that's how Wham decided to put an exclamation point.
Interesting. I wonder. Eh?
Wake me up before they come.
Oh God! Don't remind me.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. So 77. And then in 2008, you get the USS Nimitz. They're doing war exercises or whatever, training exercises out in. I forget exactly if they're off San Diego or whatever. And a series of pilots, the air traffic controller, everybody sees these ships, if you want. They're very small. You don't, it's not very distinct, but they follow these things for 7 days. And there's footage of this kind of stuff. And yet almost no one talks about it. And the air traffic controller is interviewed in the documentary.
7 days they follow
for 7 days. They can see these things. And I believe some of the fighter pilots tried to chase them down and could not keep up with them, kind of thing. It's pretty wild. It's extensive in the documentary. You see quite a bit of footage of that kind of stuff. I think all that kind of stuff was released after the I guess we should talk about the big
the New York Times article.
The New York Times article in 2017, exactly related to the Black Vault and these kind of things, where the massive document dump of all these UFO documents.
Right. Which I have to say, like, I was waiting for this in the spring of 2021. I thought, okay, we're going to hear, I thought this was a bit of like, sort of like, like a big tease on their part, because we waited for months for the Pentagon to release this information. And in the end, again, nothing definitive, nothing conclusive.
Weather balloons,
yeah. Weather balloons and guys in rubber suits.
Yeah.
And I just find it, it's always a bit of a letdown, because, again, I'm looking for something definitive. I want to, one of the more interesting characters, I think, whose story has come to light in the last few years, and it's not related to the Nimitz or the other similar sightings. There's a guy by the name of Bob Lazar that I want to get to. And Bob Lazar, I think he's in his 60s now. He's an American businessman, originally trained as a scientist. And Bob Lazar's story, I picked it up first on Joe Rogan's podcast, is that in the mid-1980s, as a young scientist, he was recruited to work at S4, which is part of Area 51 that you mentioned earlier. And when he got there, he was briefed and understood that his task along with some other young scientists, was to try to reverse engineer a series of alien spacecraft that they had at S4. Now, I've seen Lazard tell this story, and I'm looking at him. He looks like a rational guy. And he's saying that they had 9 different craft at S4 in various hangars. He saw
sports
them.
Models, the station wagon.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He was able to see them, but only had access to one, although you would think that would be enough. Yeah. And his story is so detailed that he claims that he went inside the alien spacecraft, but was which he claims was, I think, multi-level, but he was only allowed into one particular level. He describes it as a uniform dark pewter color, no markings, no knobs, no controls as we might imagine them, but large open areas that look like they might be for displays if the quote-unquote power was turned on. And he says that what he was asked to do specifically was to try and understand the functioning of a little power generator located in the spacecraft that's roughly the size of a basketball. He claims that it was generating anti-gravity, and that this is they deduce from this, they imagine this was the propulsion system that the disc was using. And he claims further that it was powered by element 115, which is one of the big super heavy, unstable radioactive elements that, there's never more than a few atoms on Earth at any one given time. I think it's called moscovium. Doesn't matter. Like, not the kind of thing you find in your backyard. And he goes into incredible detail about this. A documentary was made about his story. And again, this is... Now we're talking, the Rogan interview and the documentary are sort of 2019, 2018 phenomena, whereas his story dates back to 1989, I think, when he first got into the news telling his story about what had happened to him at S4. What do you make of that? I don't know.
I don't know. I know we sometimes hear of those kind of things, of people who've purported to have seen portions of it or have either worked on it or not, but you don't see a lot of it, and it's kind of not unbelievable, but it seems a little strange. It goes back to what we said before, that we haven't seen more of it, or none of that stuff has been snuck out, and unless it has, and it's gone to the highest bidder and sitting in someone's basement along with I don't know, Elvis's last sandwich.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos probably has it. That's it. Him or Elon Musk. They probably got the craft.
Exactly. They sprinkle it on their salad every night to try to achieve some sort of lighter than gravity enlightenment or something.
Yes.
So did you do a dive? I called it the Black Dump, but it's actually the Black Vault.
The Black Vault.
The Black Dump.
I like the Black Dump. That's good.
If you Google the Black Dump, it's not quite what you...
I imagine not.
You'll find something
I think I had one last week.
So I don't know, when the CIA released this thing, what was that, a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Did you go dive through some of those documents?
No, I didn't. I didn't get as far as doing that.
I did. It's wild. There's like stuff going back to the 40s, old typewritten documents that have been scanned, and it's fun to look at. And I was going through this.
And where do you find them all?
If you just Google the Black Vault, the CIA has released. You can now explore the CIA's entire collection of UFO documents online. And there's a site. I forget what the site is called. We'll put it in notes,
I think I would do that.
And so I went through this thing and I started reading all these documents. Not totally, but like skimming through this. And I come across this... this reference to the Voynich manual.
Oh, the Voynich manuscript.
Yes, the Voynich manuscript.
Yes, I know it well.
Oh, this is wild. And it's a letter written by, and I forget his name. I wish I could find the link now. And it's a letter written by someone working for the government and saying that they should look at this Voynich manuscript because there's blah, 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 something or other in there. And I thought it was fascinating. So I printed the letter and I gave a copy of it to my son because I had bought him a copy of the Voynich manuscript because we had seen some YouTube videos.
Oh, you mean they actually reproduce it so you can have it as a book sort of thing?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. I mean, they're not great reproductions, and they're expensive. They're hard to find. It's hard to see which one's the best one. I picked what I thought was the best one. Spent like $80, whatever, and got the book, gave it to him, and said, like, look, here's a letter from whatever, some government agency that references the Voynich manuscript going back. And I think the letter is like from the 1940s or something. So anyways, it's kind of funny. He's got it in the book now. So I thought it was interesting, but it's fascinating. There are, hundreds, if not thousands of documents, and you could just, full rabbit hole if you want.
I think you've given me something to do tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So the ships, I find that the ships, you go back, you mentioned the pewter gray. It seems that most of the sightings tend to be always in silver or gray.
Yeah, very much so.
Is there no color in the rest of the universe?
Apparently not. No.
Is it too garish to have a yellow spaceship with red?
They're
racing
probably just
stripes?
more tasteful than we are.
They're more tasteful. Yeah, they're more subdued.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're going fast enough. We don't need racing stripes.
Yes. Well, then there's the big problem, right? I mean, you look at the James Webb telescope photographs from last week, right? That was just
James Webb. Did you hear the controversy now that apparently James Webb may not have been as nice a person?
Yes, I did. I heard that. Yeah, he was apparently very homophobic.
I think we should stop naming anything after people.
Yeah,
because if you look hard enough, everyone's an asshole.
Yeah, that's because he's homophobic, right? Apparently, yeah,
possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I caught that. Yeah. And I thought to myself, like, you look at James Webb, and the first image they released was of that field of galaxies, and that was impressive enough. Mm-hmm. And you can see bending from gravity and so on and so forth. But the thing that struck me, and I didn't hear this at first, is that the field of view of that image, which is a good question to ask yourself, like what portion of the sky am I looking at, is equivalent to a grain of sand put on your fingertip and held at an arm's length.
Yeah.
And in that grain of sand, which could be repeated obviously billions of times around you, you're seeing thousands of galaxies. And you just like the sense of the enormous size of the universe, again, just suggests that it's impossible there aren't other civilizations, but are they buzzing around us in their kind of, subdued looking, kind of alien, cruiser spacecraft? I don't know.
Yeah. They're very nice gray Mercedes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Now, I thought it would have been fun if, the whole controversy about James Webb was that he had been a peeping Tom. I thought that would...
Oh, that would have been funny, actually. Yeah.
Funny.
Well, hey, I mean,
it's telescope after
early days yet. I mean, it's only been up for like 2 weeks. I sort of think so. There might be more.
There might be more, exactly. Maybe there'll be a Black Vault dump about that, yeah. So yes, the shape, we have like 3 or 4 different shapes. We have Tic Tac, we have the V, we have the
cigar.
The cigar you used to see.
Big one too, yeah.
The cigar was early on, I think in the early in the 1800s, early 19s. Often they were cigar shaped, which kind of makes you wonder with the age of the Zeppelins and stuff if they were not something like that they were spotting
right
before of course they all Hindenburged and. The colors, they tend to be uniform in grays, not a lot of colors. Shapes are very much the same. The flying V I thought was interesting in that there was a guy came on, a historian, said nobody's looked at UFOs from a historical point of view. And he mentions these experimental aircraft that had been made in the shapes of V's and that actually exist, and is there a good possibility that what we're seeing is actually some experimental
they're called flying
aircraft.
Wings, I think they're called.
Yeah, exactly. It's odd because when you look at them flying, you see like simulations of them. It doesn't look like... It seems to me like at a certain spot, if the nose dips a little too much, you're going to go flying through the air. Or the joint at the top of the V does not seem like that's got to be a hell of a weld job there.
Yeah, some of that stuff is weird looking. I mean, we're accustomed to seeing a fuselage and wings, and there's a certain thing we see. So yeah, when you see like a boomerang flying, and I feel like I know a little bit about flight because I'm a bit of a flight geek. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. Yeah. Clearly, I'm in the wrong. Let's face it, it's me. But it just looks weird. I agree.
Well, apparently other civilizations don't agree with you, and it should work. So I thought that was interesting in the terms of the shapes of the vehicles themselves, the speed as we're going also is what I was looking at when seeing the videos yesterday is the G-forces involved in some of those movements as a lot of the witnesses say, we saw it is zooming from left to right and up and down and at incredible speeds, 1,500 miles an hour or whatever it is. Man, those G-forces must be tough.
Hey.
How can the beings in there handle those kind of G-forces?
2 words, memory foam.
This is where we should pivot to a commercial from one of the memory foam mattress companies.
Or that My Pillow guy in the U.S., right? That Trump guy, whatever. Yeah.
That's the part that I find fascinating. To me, about the ships is the physics involved in there and the technology that would be involved in handling those kind of G-forces.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I've seen some of those recent videos. You look at the speeds and again, you look at the behavior of the craft and it makes no sense to our eyeballs because we're accustomed to seeing aerial objects move in a fairly, I won't say lazy, but a fairly calm, even fighter jets, they're not doing right angle turns.
No.
Doesn't make sense.
No. So I guess part 2, the gray man.
Yeah, the gray men. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, it's funny. It's not a part that interests me as much as the actual technology, the ships themselves, how did they get here? How are they flying? How do they propel themselves? And then we get to the little gray men inside and the various witnesses who say they have seen. Some are humanoid, some are not humanoid, whatever.
And this is your close encounter of the third kind, right?
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. And the fourth kind is?
I can't remember.
Abduction.
Oh, it's abduction. That's right. Oh, God.
Yeah. Exactly. So,
that's the anal probes and all that, right?
Exactly. So if we go, so we'll get to the anal probes later. The whole thing about the little gray men to me is not as fascinating in terms of the UFOs themselves. And I know a lot of people have that incredible fascination with the grays, as they call them, or
that's it, the grays. Yeah.
Be. I don't know about you. Were you ever interested in that portion of it?
Far less so. I mean, again, but part of, to go back to the beginning, one of the aspects of the Roswell incident is that there were 4 small bodies found there, and that the Air Force had actually commandeered 4 child-sized caskets when they went to clean up the crash site, and that the caskets were spirited off to, I don't think it was Area 51, there's somewhere else it went to at any rate. And then you get, again, over the years, that image of the alien, the guy with the big head and the almond-shaped eyes and the long, has become part of popular culture. To the point where I don't really believe they're out walking around, because they never have any clothes on, which is strange, and they always look the same. I just, less interesting to me to answer your question.
And they don't have genitals.
Apparently not genital free. They're like Barbie and Ken, yeah. Or Ken specifically.
Yeah, maybe like wireless charging, they do wireless humping.
Yeah, that's something. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. So there's a whole Wikipedia page about the gray aliens.
Yes.
Referred to as Zeta Reticulans.
Well, okay, so
Okay,
so that's interesting, because Lazar, going back to Bob Lazar, claims that in one of the briefing documents that he was shown before he started to work on the alien spacecraft at S4 in the mid-1980s, claimed that the craft were from Zeta Reticuli.
Oh.
So for some reason, that particular star keeps coming up. I don't know where the origin story is.
Okay, so it's a star. Interesting.
I think it's Zeta Reticuli. I think so, yeah.
Interesting.
Or that's probably the star and the planet. I think, yes, something like that. I think it's a star-planet combination, but anyways.
Oh, it's a wide binary star system in the southern constellation of Reticulum.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been my guess.
Okay. 39.3 light years away.
Okay. There's another thing there. I mean, we talk about the physics, right? So now that's 40 light years away. So that means 40 years of travel at 186,000 miles a second, or 300,000 kilometers a second.
Yeah. Are we there yet?
It's a long, we're not there. Yeah. That's a long, long way to go. And I think if the Zeta Reticulans, so you have to now assume that the Zeta Reticulans have cracked the speed of light.
Wormholes.
Wormhole. Yeah, they discovered a wormhole. Where we're given to understand that the speed of light is not crackable, according to all the top grade physicists. And wormholes, who knows? But it just again, it seems to me that it's a lot of effort for an alien civilization to go through, to show up here and cut a crop circle, lurk, cut a crop circle, mutilate some cattle. Here I am. I'm the guy who wants to believe, and I have to wonder about some of this stuff,
They're trolling us.
They're trolling us.
I like the description here. It says they have usually no sex organs. They have they only have like nostrils or maybe ears and eyes. I'm like, that's a hell of a long time to travel. How do you pee?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's a good point.
Maybe they don't have liquid. Maybe that's why they can stand the G-forces. There's no liquid. They're made of sand.
See, that's good thinking. Yeah, that's good thinking.
Outside the box there.
Outside the box. Way outside the box.
Yeah, pretty wild. So often seen in the popular culture. You've seen it in the X-Files. We've seen it a little bit everywhere. The aliens. Do
you love the X-Files? I love that show. Eh?
That was fantastic.
Yeah. I still, to this day. I mean, there's some of those shows I think are just bang on.
Yeah. They really milked the whole alien part. There's the abduction of his sister.
His sister
was abducted.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting is they didn't just dwell on that whole thing. They had their other monsters of the week kind of thing.
Yeah, the one you mentioned the other day was the Fluke Man.
Fluke Man,
That's
yes.
so disgusting. Or there was that guy who could squeeze himself through air ducts.
Yeah,
whatever he was called.
Yeah,
Toombs, Eugene Toombs, I think it was.
Yeah, and I think he appears in 2 episodes.
Yeah,
He's one of the few freaks who appears in a couple.
Yeah, he does. He comes back. He was just that good, you know? Like exuding this yellow goo onto everything. It was so disgusting, you know?
Yeah, the first X-Files I ever saw, I had never heard of the show, and I went to a friend's house, and he says, "You got to see this," and it's the episode with the incestuous family. Where they've got the mother hidden under the floorboards with her arms and legs cut off, and basically they've been having
I
know, so it was chilling episode. Really, if you haven't seen, I forget what it's called, but it is a disturbing episode.
That is disturbing just to listen to as you describe it.
Yeah, and the second episode I saw was Fluke Man. So there you go, a nice intro to the
that was some major makeup on the Fluke Man, eh?
Yes,
that was something.
Yeah. That was wild.
He was supposed to be a mutant from Chernobyl, right? That was the idea there.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what they
I've
say.
forgotten that part. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
How he got into the ocean, God only knows. And
Chernobyl's inland, isn't it?
It's inland. It's quite inland. I only know that because of the Ukraine war. Okay. I'd never gone to look for it, but it's in the northern part of Ukraine.
Okay. Did you see the Chernobyl series?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
I loved it. That was a fantastic series. Yeah.
So we have here, excuse me, the X-Files. We've got aliens in other depictions. You think of Star Wars and Star Trek. I think Star Trek does aliens better than Star Wars. Star Wars, George Lucas. I'm sorry, he's got this obsession with Muppet-like creatures. Think of the Ewoks or those guys in the band.
I know what you're talking about. I was super disappointed with Star Wars when it came out. I saw it because it wasn't what I wanted in terms of science fiction, right? For me, and it's a taste thing, right? Like I liked 2001: Space Odyssey, Star Trek, obviously, Alien that came out a couple of years after Close Encounters, actually. But the Star Wars style, not really for me.
Yeah, it was like moving cartoons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was like
a
space western or something like that. So it wasn't really my deal.
No, exactly. And I'll blame Lucas for everything.
You can blame him. Yeah, and some of the more recent ones too, like Contact and
Arrival.
That's right. That was Denis Villeneuve, I think. Right, made that. Those are more to my liking because I can look at that and I can think, that's probably how it will be, something like that.
Yeah. I think I'd prefer that than those crazy creatures from Star Wars.
Yes, so Jabba the Hutt and all that business.
Exactly. And then you have the what was that? Oh my God, not 27 Days After. District 19.
Oh, District 19.
Yeah, that I thought was fascinating.
That was great. I've forgotten that. That was a great movie. Yeah.
What
were they called? The prawns, eh?
Because they kind of look like
big prawns. Yeah.
Praying mantis.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all we need is aliens to come down and be like praying mantis.
Yeah. Imagine.
I think I would lose my shit.
Well, think about The Thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Hey.
One of the greatest
movies ever, right?
Still holds up. It's 30 years now.
40, 82, I think. So 40 years. I think it's 40 years. Yeah. And in fact, one of the X-Files episodes is a ripoff of The Thing.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. They're up in they're up in a
up north. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sort of thing. I mean, ripoff. I mean, an homage. It's an homage sort of thing, right? Yeah.
Homage is the nice way of saying ripoff. Sometimes.
It is. Yeah. So it was good. There's great stuff.
Yeah, again, there's a thing in there, and you see that at the beginning, the ship coming by or something, launching a probe that lands on the Earth and gets buried. And it's true, there is a big ship in there, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Did you ever read the original story?
No, I did not.
Yeah. It's different. It's in the Arctic instead of Antarctica, or the opposite, whatever, I forget.
Yeah.
And there's also a 1950s version of The Thing, which is very different, very stiff upper lip kind of thing, more closer to the book. I think John Carpenter's version is much better, has a much better tension,
right,
than the 1950s version.
Well, do you remember the movie? This is 1960. It's a black and white English movie called The Village of the Damned. Actually, it's called The Village of the Damned. It's from a book called The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham.
Great title,
Midwich Cuckoos. Very British title. You can see why they went for Village of the Damned. And in the Village of the Damned, this little village in England falls asleep for a period of time unexpectedly. Well, if you like, imagine this scenario where if you rode into this village on your bicycle, you would pass out at a certain point. At any rate, so this phenomenon goes on. Maybe it's for 24 hours, something like that, and then it just the village comes back to life, and no one can understand what's happened. Then, as the months go by, it turns out that all the women in the village that are of childbearing age are simultaneously pregnant. Oh. And you begin to realize something really strange has happened.
Sounds like a Republican dream.
It doesn't, eh? So, yeah, and you begin to realize that what they're suggesting is that during they call it the timeout, that a mass alien impregnation took place. So these ones obviously had, sex organs.
But they don't have genitals.
Well, then you've got to wonder about that, right?
Maybe it's those long fingers.
Yeah, maybe, dual purpose.
We're going to get in trouble for
that. We are going to get in trouble. So, what happens is the children grow up that are all born at the same time, and they're unusual. They're more, they have a certain look. They all have very blonde, whitish hair. Oh, yeah. Their fingernails have a different shape. It's subtle. It's a good little science fiction film. And in the end, they are destroyed they have a hive mind. They're destroyed by a guy in the village, a doctor in the village, who recognizes them as a threat and is able to block himself from their mental power or something like that. And they all get burned alive in a school or something like that.
Fun times.
Fun times, yeah. Yeah, but they're like an alien hybrid that have been brought to Earth to essentially take us over.
Interesting. So 1960, the original film, and in 1995, our friend John Carpenter did a remake.
Did he really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
With Christopher Reeve and Kirstie Alley. Yeah,
well, that's Christopher Reeve.
Yeah,
Superman. Christopher Reeve.
Superman, exactly. Yeah,
no kidding, eh? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and so the Midwich Cuckoos.
That's it. The Midwich
Cuckoos,
written in
'57 by John Wyndham.
Yeah, that's a book. Well, I was a big John Wyndham fan. He also did The Day of the Triffids.
Oh,
with the plants, the man-eating plants.
I think I might have read that.
Yeah. And the chrysalids and a few others sort of thing. Okay. So he's an English science fiction writer, from the 50s. So, Village of the Damned was great from that person. So, you never saw the little green man or the little gray man in this particular vision of what alien contact could be like, but they left their mark, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. So interesting depictions, a little bit all over the place, and I find it interesting that what we see here, like science fiction, has taken it in a completely different way as opposed to what we're seeing in the pseudo documentaries, whatever, of the Greys. The Greys. Yeah. We seem to have moved away in science fiction from the Greys to other types of
like Arrival,
exactly,
which was so exotic. I mean, those what they call that, the hexapods or the septapods or whatever, those giant beings that were living in like that gas environment inside their giant ships. That to me was really, I thought that. Again, I could suspend my disbelief and get behind that and really enjoy that as a story. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating. I love the nonlinear time.
Nonlinear time. That was great.
Yeah, exactly.
That explained their ability to travel, of course.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Guild Navigators from Doom.
Yeah, you're right, eh? The Guild Navigators. That's another one. Yeah.
That giant pod of gas. You got to wonder if that's self-produced gas. Yeah. So now I guess we should move on to the third part, which is the abductions.
The abductions, yes.
So while watching the documentary yesterday, I come across this thing of, let me find my note here, Saint Teresa of Avila, who was an Italian nun in the 1500s. And the woman goes on to read the description. I didn't write the description down. Something to do about being probed, kind of stuff in her abdomen.
The nun was probed? That's what you're saying, just to be clear?
Yes, so something to that effect. I should look it up. So they go on and they start talking about the depictions of Saint Teresa in sculpture back then, because there was no NFTs in the 1500s.
Yeah, right.
So all they had was paintings and sculptures. And so in the sculptures, often you'll see the face turned away, almost in agony or ecstasy. Often, together. And there is I don't know, like a little guy there, like a little Cupid with a lance.
No kidding.
And so they're trying to make some illusion that possibly Saint Teresa's depiction of whatever event happened may have been an early probing.
Oh my God.
It kind of makes me want to look at all those statues with a different light, different eye.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Maybe some hallucinogenics. I don't know. Well, I thought that was interesting. The 1500s. So there's a lot of interviews in the fourth part of the documentary where they really go into the alien abductions, and they go into, and I believe his name is John Mack, I want to say, I'm probably butchering his name, who was a renowned psychologist at the time, had won the Pulitzers for some of his earlier books, and he started studying all these witnesses who claimed to have been abducted, and so he went on to talk shows and whatever, and he spoke about them, and he believed that they truly believed that they had been abducted, and that he interviewed them separately and never published the stuff till after, so that there wouldn't be cross-contamination. You don't want to mix the chicken with the vegetables. And that their descriptions of what happens were very, very similar and also very credible. And these were, and I love this, they were all highly intelligent, above average intelligence. And then the fact that they have to keep restating that, basically saying, listen, these are not nuts. These are credible people. And there's clips of interviews of some of the people describing their stuff, which I find interesting. Now, I never met anyone who claims to have been abducted.
Neither have I.
And but there's a few in the documentary, and these people are talking. They don't seem like nuts. It's interesting. You don't hear as much of it now in terms of the abductions recently, but it seems to me like the 70s was
it's huge.
full
I
of
think the
this
70s
stuff.
and the 80s, absolutely. Well, you had that Whitley Strieber book, Contact, back then.
Yeah.
That was all based around like abduction stories. And Barney and
Macrame.
Betty Hill was earlier. That was in the 60s, but that's probably the first. You mentioned it earlier. The first modern abduction story was Barney and Betty Hill.
Yeah.
But I mean, to your earlier question, I mean, when we get into abduction territory, I'm beginning to get super skeptical here. I mean, but then again, I could apply the same filter to Bob Lazar, talking about his experience at he's either making it up, or it's true. I don't see any middle ground. And with the abductees, I gotta guess they're either something happened to them that they believe, or they're making it up. I don't know what the third option is.
That's the thing. That's the part I also have trouble with wrapping my head around. I'm not saying it's not true or what, but to me, that's almost the least interesting part of this. Yeah. Especially the probings and the
cattle mutilations, to throw another one out there.
Yeah, exactly. So John Mack, John E. Mack was his name. Yeah, he died in. Oh yes, this is the beauty of it. So John E. Mack had all these. He's written books about abductions and all the studies he's done, and he gets hit by a car in London.
Oh, really?
Okay, so he gets hit by a car in London, and the thing was, they said he looked right instead of left, or left instead of right, because the car's going the wrong way, the different way in London. It looked the wrong way, got hit by a car, died instantly. So then the conspiracy theories start coming on that other John Macks had been killed on the same day. And this was a conspiracy to take out John Mack, and to make sure they got the right one, they were taking them all out.
All the John Macks? I see.
Or some of the John Macks.
Yeah.
Disproved. This not true. It didn't happen. Conspiracy theorists are saying that he was murdered because he knew too much, kind of thing. And the government or some sinister organization wanted to shut him up. I was like, wow, even in conspiracy theories, there's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So that's pretty wild. Pretty wild.
Well, some of those abduction stories, I mean, again, they really float off into what really clearly sounds delusional to me. I've heard of people saying that they've seen people floating out of their second-story bedroom windows to float towards alien spacecraft. And you've heard of that one, right?
Yeah, exactly. You see it often in cartoons where you're sucked up.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, I guess you don't have to worry about landing gear.
True, or sensible shoes, you're good, sort of thing, right?
Exactly. You get pulled up. I always wonder, as it's happening, does your clothes get pulled off?
Yeah.
If you're wearing a hat, does the hat get pulled off before the rest of you gets up there?
Yeah.
So interesting topic, the whole abduction
thing. I think
thing.
so, yeah. Well, again, it's certainly widespread enough. I mean, I heard somewhere that if you look at the number of people, and it's always the United States who gets these statistics come out of, something like, this is going to sound crazy, but something like 3% of the U.S. population believes it's been abducted by aliens. Can that be right?
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. I know. That sounds wrong, and yet I feel like I've heard it somewhere.
I think they just drink too much, maybe. Have a little blackout, not quite sure what's happening.
Mind you, half of them think Elvis is still alive, so I guess it's not that shocking. Or something like that.
You ever go out for a night and wake up in someone else's room? You're like, how did I get here? Must have been an alien abduction, and they dropped me off at the wrong house.
Yeah, I lost time.
Exactly.
4 hours.
Yeah. So I guess that's a little wrap up on our dive into the UFOs.
The UFOs, yeah, the UAPs.
Yeah, UAPs. I should have made a list of all the acronyms and all the associations, these groups that had been created to follow this kind of stuff.
Oh, there's MUFON. They MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Yeah. I get their newsletter. I signed up for it a couple of years ago. Yeah. I don't know why. I think it was, I just did.
Do they have merch?
Probably, yeah. I'm sure they have merch.
I'm with MUFON.
I'm sure they have merch, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, no, very acronym heavy. But, it is a fascinating topic. And, I was looking on the internet this morning, and there's just literally being stories published now in the last month or so about new information coming out of the Pentagon, new disclosures, year of the UFO, they're calling it. So who knows? Maybe at some point we'll get that clear photograph I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And have you, Dave, ever seen lights?
No.
Do you know anybody who has?
I do not. Okay. I do not. No, I know. I mean, I've done a bit of astronomy in my life. And I certainly, whenever I've been out with my telescope in the middle of the night, I've had that thought, like, I mean, this is, if I'm going to see one, this is when I'm going to see it. And nothing has ever happened. Okay. Unfortunately.
Apparently one of my cousins saw lights.
Saw lights.
This was told to me by my brother that one of our cousins has seen the light and basically had recounted to him the story. I don't know. I wasn't there when the story was told, but apparently, yes, that's about as close as I get to an encounter, apart from seeing lights when I, jab my toe.
Right. Yeah. And now it's time for this week's rant. Richard, what's pissing you off?
What's bugging me is men's lawns. Have you seen this? And I'm going to go men because most of the time I see it, it's the guy.
Yeah, it's us. It's us.
It's the whole thing down there with the nail clippers, getting the grass, the perfect length, the obsession with removing all the weeds. You see these like putting greens down the street. Everybody's got their putting greens set up, and they spend so much energy and gasoline. I mean, you got these guys with the mowers out there for hours. They're manicuring their lawns within an inch of their lives to get rid of every single weed.
My father shampooed our lawn once, and I'm making that up. Mind you, it was the late 70s, but he did do it.
Did he do a blow dry after?
He probably did, yeah.
He probably did. I seen some of my neighbors will actually go down there, and every spring we'll be pulling up all the dandelions. And I remember saying to one of them, I said, you realize they're back next year? And he's like, well, I got to do it. Got to do it kind of thing. I'm like, you're taking away the bees, the butterflies. My lawn is full of dandelions and wild things so that the butterflies and the bees have a place to go.
Sounds like Shangri-La.
Sounds like Shangri-La. What goes on a green lawn? Nothing but your neighbor's dog. All right, so I guess that's it. And
Have a great week, everybody.